Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the ACT updates. And we have our speaker, Tony Cortez, that you will see on the screen. I am Lisa Nelson, your host for this session. Just a few housekeeping rules. Please make sure your microphone is turned off. You are muted so that you don't interrupt. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat, or you're welcome to come off mute and ask that question. Tony will take questions as we go. So I will be watching the chat. So if you don't want to come off mute, you are welcome to put your question in the chat. Tony and I will probably turn off our cameras for internet sake because we're just having some internet issues with the wind. I know that surprises everybody. And please don't forget to complete the session feedback form on the Whova app or the website in your agenda. And you will receive a conference survey on March the 11th. So thank you so much for attending and enjoy the session with Tony. Take it away, Tony.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for attending today. I have a lot of updates to cover for you. There should be a little something for everybody here. So if you are brand new to the ACT experience, or if you're a seasoned veteran, you're going to be walking away with some things. This PowerPoint is in PDF format. It is attached to the session for you to be able to download. All of the links that I'm going to be talking about in here are going to be summarized at the end, and they are executable from the PDF. So just so you know, a ton of links for you there. I'm going to be covering them pretty quickly, but they are there for you to go back and use to the PDF. Now, as we go through this, I have probably about 45 slides or so, but getting through the slides is not more important than your questions. So as we go through this, please feel free to ask questions. Let's go ahead and kick this off here next with, oh, by the way, my contact information there. I'm the Senior Account Executive for the state of Oklahoma and North Texas. My mobile number is listed there, as well as my email address. I'll show that to you again at the end of the session. The best way to contact me, though, right now is through email. And I say that because if you're calling me and you're saying, asking me for something, or you need something, or you need to get something done, a lot of times it's better to put it in your words in an email than it is for me over the phone and then translate it as I send it on to the appropriate areas. So please use email first when possible. All right, let's get going and see what we got here. So we have kind of an ambitious agenda, so to speak. And so some of the things that I'm going to talk about are standards and support materials. These are questions I get a lot across Oklahoma in the field. Online reporting, which is not necessarily new, but I would say still a little new for some folks. Accommodations through the TAA system, district testing, which is also school day testing. And this is where sophomores, juniors, or seniors can take an ACT on a school day. ACT state testing. And when I refer to state testing, I'm really talking about public institutions. And I say that because the Oklahoma State Department of Education runs that program. And so state testing is for juniors, funded through the State Department. It happens every single year. And I believe you have to test around 95% or so of your students. And it's run through the Office of Assessments, and that's for public institutions. I'm also going to talk briefly about national testing and some options that are available. I'm going to talk also about pre-ACT and my-ACT as well. So first and foremost, what you need to know is that at ACT, we go where the data tells us to go. And one of the inputs that we have is from all of you in the field. And I say that because every 3 to 5 years, we conduct what's called a national curriculum survey. And so we look K to career for input from educators, from workforce professionals, and business leaders as well, to kind of advise us on what we need to do to make sure that those kids are on track to be successful in college and career. Now, the National Curriculum Survey was just conducted again in 2020. There's some very interesting things in there. And so if you're looking at pulling in some outside information about what's going on nationally, maybe you're doing a presentation to the board trying to justify some of the things or changes that you might be doing locally, I would look at this. There might be some interesting things for you. In particular, when you look at this, one of the things that I pulled up that I always like to see is some of the responses from the employees versus the supervisors. And so that's table 6 that I pulled up for you there. And in particular, this part was a questionnaire, and they were kind of asking employees what they thought would be an obstacle to workplace success, as well as asking the supervisors the same question and having them, of course, rank them. And what you'll note right away when you look at that, there's some discrepancies in there. In particular, if you look towards the middle, there's a discrepancy in one that sticks out to me right away: solving problems as part of a team. Why is that important? Because we're talking about social emotional learning, and we all know social emotional learning has been, a hot topic fairly recently, and how we identify gaps and address those in the school setting. It's not only coming, it is part of, the process, and we're having to address those in the school setting. But collegiality, collaboration, of course, fall in there under teamwork. And if you look, employees rated that at about a 52, whereas supervisors rate that at a 75. So there's a big difference there. The bottom ones stick out as well, especially the one about applying foundational academic knowledge. And so the employees were saying it's not as important or not as much of an obstacle to workplace success, to our supervisors were saying, yes, it is. So some very interesting information there. I'd encourage you to take a look at that. I've provided a link for this at the end of this presentation. Now, we use a national curriculum survey to build our college and career readiness standards. And every single standard across the nation, whether it's in Oklahoma or other states that have a specific focus on college and career readiness, you should be looking at these standards. We've been doing this ACT's been doing this for quite a while. We have tons of empirical data that support our standards and success in college and career. And in particular, the focus initially was on first-year college coursework, but we've advanced to actually, persistence, graduation, among other things, especially with STEM and ELA. But we have standards here for you. You'll have a link at the end. You can actually order standards posters through ACT, and I'll talk to you about that. But English, math, reading, science, and writing are available. I would encourage you to take a look at those. These are some great things to have locally for your folks to kind of put them on the wall and start tracking some of these with their students in relation to specific score ranges and where you want them to be, so to speak. But it does post the knowledge, skills, and abilities at each specific score level. I get a ton of questions about where do we go to get fee waivers, standards posters, for example, and that's through the College and Career Readiness Information System. It's usually abbreviated as CCRIS, for example. And this is where you go to order up to 4 free fee waivers per eligible student. And I say eligible because this is actually based on financial need. So just keep that in mind, that this is based on financial need is one of the points there that they base that on. But there's a link there to the College and Career Readiness System. You can go in there and you can actually order some materials here by clicking on that button. And once you click on that button, this is what you will see. The difference, ACT support materials. You can order stuff for the pre-ACT. This is where we go, of course, for pre-ACT as well. Pre-ACT 8 and 9 word keys, for example. But you'll need to sign in on the left, and you'll be able to choose a product to order. So clicking on ACT support materials will allow you to look at ordering standards posters or fee waivers, for example. Now, there was another icon in there that many of you seasoned veterans were probably familiar with if you did accommodations, and that is the TAA system. Well, now when you click on that, it's going to take you to Success, which is basically our one-stop shop for a lot of different things. So that's why I kind of threw the question up there, what happened to the front door? Because we kind of moved it on you. Let's see where it went. This is the front door. This is pretty much the front door for almost everything ACT. Why did we do this? The reason for this is because many of you have told me you deal with multiple products and services and multiple vendors, and it's very inconvenient for you to have multiple emails and passwords associated with different products and services for ACT. So we're trying to put everything under the sun as kind of in this system, but as the gatekeeper, so to speak, or the doorway for these products and services. So what's on there right now? Well, in order to find that out, you need to sign in. And so you'll need to sign in and create an account in Success. And you can use your old email and password that you used for the TAA system, and it should sync. I think it can take up to 24 hours to sync. If you don't have an account, that's fine, just create one. But when you look at this in the middle, you're going to see several different things there that are available in Success right now. One of them is online reporting. So you'll have access to both contract and non-contract data. I'll talk about that in just a minute. The next is you're going to see, you're going to have access, if you're approved through a trusted agent, for the TAA system to be able to do accommodations. And you're going to have access to a bunch of resources. Now, you don't need to log in to see all the resources there. They're on the right. You can click on them. In particular, if you look over to the right, there's resources on online reporting. So if you're having questions about that, I would click on that and explore that. That takes you to what we call the Knowledge Hub. We sent out an email to superintendents and private school leaders across the state, or actually nationally, but here in Oklahoma, it went out in the fall of 2019. This went out to superintendents and private school leaders. It was informing them that we are moving to an online data system and that there's a lot of things that are going to be put onto that, and that we need the superintendents or the private school leaders to go in and set up an account on this system. It said a letter would follow, a physical letter. And so we sent a physical letter, and the letter looks like this on the left. And so this one, I just happened to update it as of last year. But the two things that stick out are down towards the middle, where it has the website to where they needed to go, and then an access code in their organization. The access code is extremely important because that's what they use to set up initial, what we call trusted agent access in the system. Now, there can be several trusted agents in the system, but superintendents primarily are the first trusted agents in the system because they have to go in there and set up the school hierarchy or approve it and give others access. Now, with that being said, there are plenty of superintendents across the state that got some of this stuff and some of them that didn't. And so if your superintendent has not set up an account and you have not accessed this system, have your superintendent email me right away, because you need to be able to get into this to look at your data, for example, also for accommodations. In addition to that, some superintendents have just taken the access code and passed it on to a district test coordinator, or principal. That's perfectly fine. But the initial doorway, the initial gatekeeper, so to speak, is the superintendent or private school leader. And that's how we must go through first. And I'd be happy to email them that information. And then, of course, copy you on some additional information to help you navigate the system. This is just a picture of the Knowledge Hub. The Knowledge Hub is our one-stop shop for resources. I'm talking about training resources, videos, communication toolkits where you can reach out to your parents and the students and explain to them why you're taking this test, or specifics about the test. There's just so much in there. One of the main complaints that a lot of folks have had in the past is just navigating our system and finding resources to help support you, whether you're giving the pre-ACT or the pre-ACT 8 and 9, for example, or the ACT. And this is where you'll find them. And in particular, there's a section on online reporting and how to invite a test accommodations coordinator. So if you're a trusted agent, like a superintendent, you want to invite somebody into the system to be an accommodations coordinator, you would follow these guidelines here, these training resources, and I'll have a link to these at the end as well. So superintendents or private school leaders are the initial trusted agent. They can designate others as trusted agents. Trusted agents can assign different roles in the system. And keep in mind, this is where your online data is and your accommodations. For data, contract and non-contract. So when I say non-contract, I'm talking about national testing. Non-contract, national testing. Contract means district testing or state testing data will be in the system. It's named that because there has to be a contract to execute that process. So contract data versus non-contract data. I've also included on the right just some examples of the roles. And so we've got a detailed viewer role, a summary viewer, and a trusted agent, and the different things that they can do in the system. Just keep in mind that we designed this system to be accessible to everyone at your school site, meaning down to the teacher level. So that's entirely up to you how you disseminate that information and give access. But you can give a detailed viewer access to maybe, department heads, for example, so they can look at some of the data per site. So just a reminder, pass out some of these codes and get it to the right folks. I would have multiple trusted agents in the system, and I would have more than one person that can do accommodations. We all know people will miss from school from time to time, and others may need to step in and help out. This is a screenshot of some of the tabs in the middle, and I don't have all of them on here, but just a few of them. When you look into success and you have access, you're going to see ACT test scores and reports. You're going to say Pearson Access Next. That takes you to that test admin site where you actually go in and set up sessions for online testing and do student data uploads if you need to, enroll students or unenroll students, stuff like that. Then you can invite new users and manage users. This is a trusted agent account. How do I know? Because they can invite users and they can manage users. Manage users, you can go in there and remove people that are no longer in your school system, for example. But there's some additional tabs that I'm not showing there. But that's obviously where you start with. Now, if you're a district test coordinator and you have access to this system, but you cannot not see your non-contract data, meaning the national test data, the reason for that is probably because your superintendent has not set up a trusted agent account. I say that because ACT actually went in and set up a little access to district data or state testing data as well for district test coordinators. But we need the superintendent in there to approve the hierarchy to get the national test data done too. So just keep that in mind. If you're missing some data in there, that's probably why. Next thing is just kind of looking at what's available in online reporting. There's a ton of stuff in there. There's aggregate reports, there's individual reports. This is a specific aggregate report for a school district. Notice it has ACT ID on the left, last name, first name, middle initial, their test date, very important as well for searching for scores, the date of birth, their composite, and all their different scores. And there are different reports you can pull in here, and you can disaggregate at different levels as well. One of the main questions I get is, where are student reports? We don't have them. They're in online reporting. Now, these online reports, depending on the administration, they will arrive anywhere between 3 to 8 weeks after we receive the answer documents and they're scored. So keep that in mind. Whenever you give it a test, it could be up to 3 to 8 weeks, depending on, what's going on here as to whether or not that data is in the school system, in the Success online portal. Paper reports for national testing, we're not shipping those to schools. If we're talking about district or state testing, sometimes we'll ship reports depending on the contract, for example. But you can download these reports and print these reports. So you should have access to these. If you don't, get your superintendent, check with your superintendent, make sure they have access, and have them email me, and we'll get it fixed. Very quickly, there are 4 different ways to take an ACT, and this can be confusing for some folks. So I just wanted to talk about this just real quick. There's one called ACT on campus. That's what we used to call the residual test. Now, what ACT on campus is, it's basically the ability of a student to walk into a campus, a college or university, and take an ACT on site. Now, that university can use it in several different ways. It depends on where you're at. Some of them may use it for course placement. Some of them may use it for admissions purposes, but it's only good for that specific university that they take it at. Now, I'm not going to focus a ton on that. The next 3 things are the ones that are going to be really important to you, and they are district or school day testing. That's where your kids can take an ACT in fall, early spring, late spring, and late April on a school day. And then Oklahoma State testing, which is for public institutions. That's the junior test funded through the Oklahoma State Department of Education. And then, of course, national testing, which I know most of you are probably familiar with. So I mentioned on campus, the benefit of having kids to be able to walk into a campus just about anywhere and take an ACT is, a lot of times these colleges will get students that just show up. They didn't even know about them. They had no relationship with them whatsoever. Nobody reached out or talked to anybody. Sometimes they didn't even know this kid existed. So until they showed up on their campus, and sometimes they show up on their campus like the day before, the day of, classes. And so on campus is pretty good for being able to give them an ACT for course placement, for college admissions, right then and there. It's not transferable. This is the only one that's not transferable. This is per specific site, but this is for those campuses to be able to kind of identify, where that student's at, to be able to place them in coursework as well. Now, I say that because last year we had a bunch of juniors that didn't take the test because of coronavirus, and it was canceled across the state for state testing. So I forget what the total numbers were, but it was over 50% of those that dropped taking an ACT. And I guarantee you've had kids show up on campuses. It happens all the time without an ACT, and some of them are giving them the ACT when they get to campus. District testing. So we had a lot of folks use district testing in the fall and a lot for early spring. In particular, the State Department for Public Institutions agreed to fund senior testing. A lot of you participated in that, but that was through the district testing process. District testing is available every year in fall, early spring, and late April. The remaining dates are that we have available right now are late spring, which has the test date of for paper for test window 1 for March 30th, and then test window 2 for April 13th. Now, if you're familiar with the way we name things, this used to be named initial test date and makeup test date. We just call them window 1 and window 2. Online testing has more of a longer window, so to speak. And I say that because with paper testing, you have to test on that day. We call it a window, but it's not really a window. You test on that day. March 30th is your day. April 13th is your day. For online testing, we have windows. And so the great thing about online testing is you can split your students up and test over several days. So window 1 has 6 days and window 2 has 6 days. So fall right now has been historically paper and pencil only. We may be looking in the future to expand that to have online testing options. Early spring and late spring have both paper or online. And then late April is online only. And so you can see test window 1 and test window 2. So it's shortened just a little bit there. If you're interested in more information, please go to the district testing webpage. The pricing is listed there. That is the current pricing. However, come fall, these prices usually change, just to let you know, but it's based on free and reduced lunch status. Sophomores, juniors, and seniors can participate in district school day testing, as well as homeschoolers. I've had homeschoolers come up and go to take a test at a school or district. It's entirely dependent on the school or district there. We do have a homeschoolers code that you can enter in to keep that data kind of separate from yours. Keep in mind that kids that take an ACT 2 or more times on average gain 4.2 points. That is huge, especially when they're looking for scholarships to help them pay for their tuition and expenses. Now, we have a lot of folks here that are in public institutions that have been doing district testing and state testing. Just keep in mind that we've changed the email format that comes to you so as to not create confusion, because in the past it said from state and district testing, which was confusing. You receive individual emails from state testing or district testing, so you need to look and see who those come from. So we've changed up the naming convention and how we word things a little bit to help clarify. We're talking about a district test versus a state test, and this is for public institutions, of course, that are using state testing, and those that have one test coordinator that does everything. And that's what makes it so hard on those folks. They have to separate those emails out. Also, in Pearson Access Next, keep in mind that when you're working in the system, you need to have access to both. If you're doing district testing and state testing at the same time or within the same window, you need to have access to both. Some folks have access to district and not state, or state and not district, and we've had to work through a lot of those. But in the upper right-hand corner, the biggest mistake that I see is they're not choosing the correct administration when working in the system. So one will say like early spring district testing or late spring. One will say like ACT 2020 Oklahoma or something like that. That's referring to state testing. So just keep in mind that in the upper right-hand corner for Pearson Access Next, which is the testadministration.whatact.org site, when you're working in there, make sure you're looking at the correct administration. Check the tabs. If you don't have that tab, just email me. We'll make sure that you have the correct access. Now, a lot of you have questions all the time, and you've told me you've been having trouble getting through to customer care. I'm just going to say I'm sorry. That's completely unacceptable. I have been handling numerous customer care phone calls and emails for the past probably 2.5 months until we get this ship corrected, so to speak. And we are very aware of the wait times that you've had recently. I will say this, please don't wait to the last couple of days to do something in the system and figure out that you don't have access or you don't understand what's going on. I'm going to give you a ton of links and resources, and you can always reach out to me. But we've had people miss accommodations deadlines. We've had people miss student data, the ability to enroll people and manage participation. So just please keep that in mind. When everybody calls at once over the last couple of days, it completely jams the phone lines. You can always reach out to me. I have somebody local here that handles Oklahoma, and we'll get you taken care of. But I will tell you this. We're doing everything that we can do to answer your questions right now. We have office hours that are virtual office hours for you. So if you have questions about accommodations, you need to write this down, because every Monday and Wednesday through April 7th, there's a Monday session, there's a Wednesday session. The people from accommodations are there in that session. It's a Q&A session to help you. Doesn't matter if you use a national testing, state testing, district testing, use that session if you have accommodations questions. They're going to be right there for you. These are the people that do it, that know it. For me, I've had to learn a lot. There are things that I don't know. These people live this. So that's where you need to go. Same thing for district testing. This is every Wednesday all the way up until April 14th. So we've been doing this consistently. And I'll tell you what, we just have not had the attendance that we thought we would for these. But the folks that have attended these, I've talked to them, they said, yeah, this has been extremely helpful to have somebody right there that's in the know, that uses these systems and can explain things to you. And that's what they're there for. So we're trying to take care of you folks. Please hang in there with us. You know that you mean a great deal to us, and we appreciate all that you do for our students across the state. State testing. I get a lot of questions about state testing, in particular, questions that can be answered by going to the state testing website. So what I've pulled here is the state testing website, and this is for public institutions. This is through the Oklahoma State Department of Education. This format might look familiar to you if you've been looking around on their webpage before, but this is in particular the landing page for college and career readiness assessments. And so I've included that link in there. I've also included the Oklahoma webpage, ACT webpage, that will have an access point for the Oklahoma junior ACT test and the pre-ACT funded through, of course, the Regents for grade 10 for public and private institutions. And those links will have a lot of information and training resources on there. Also keep in mind that you'll see an ACT informed consent form on there. If you're doing a state test, I'm referring to a state test only for public institutions, not national testing or district testing. If you're doing a state test for juniors, you have to give out a consent form to those folks to take home, because they need to be able to fill that out in relation to the non-test portion of the ACT, that interest inventory that we'll discuss in some more detail here in just a minute. This is what the website looks like. This is the first page here. And at the top of it, it's going to have your test dates. This has been updated. You can see the new test dates there. The ACT taken online. Of course, the State Department asks that you take the ACT online. If you need paper, that's something that you need to get approved through the State Department. So I want you to understand that. If you're having issues with online testing, for example, you need to contact the state also, and you're requesting paper. Or if you had a student, for example, most of the time paper accommodations need to also be, approved through the state as well. So paper testing in itself is not really an accommodations, so to speak. That's local control, and that local control is designated to the State Department. There's some quick links in the middle there. Pearson Access Next, that's that test admin site. That's where you go to, verify your managed participation, student data uploads, for example, pull up students, look at them in the system, set up your sessions for online testing. The TAA system as well, and preparing for state testing, there's an FAQ form. I would encourage you to look at that. Believe it or not, some of you that have contributed to that, because you send me questions all the time, and I'm happy to answer those, but we start putting some of the common questions in the FAQ document. So that's there for you. Hopefully it will be helpful to you. There's the general information line for state and district testing, extension 2800. There's a contact form that you can fill out. Accommodations also has their own line in an email. And anytime you send an email to somebody, if you feel like you're questioning a response, or you feel like you're not getting an adequate, something responded to in an adequate amount of time, just copy me on it or forward it. We'll take care of you. There's, for state policy questions, the Office of Assessments, who you need to contact, and their phone number is there, as well as their email address. National testing, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with national testing. This is where they go take an ACT on a Saturday or even a Sunday. As of late, we added in some Sunday dates this year. The remaining date options are going to be for April 17th, June 12th, and July 17th. Notice that the registration deadline for April 17th is coming up here pretty quick. You can actually apply to be a national test center. We're always looking for national test centers out there. Just keep in mind that if you're a national test center, they're going to look at your surroundings to see what other national test centers are there. We don't oversaturate the national test centers in a specific area. So we look at travel time, for example, and who's close to you. But also keep in mind that students from other schools and districts are going to be coming to your site. Now, we all know what's going on with coronavirus and the concerns that we have. So we've incorporated something new, which is an unlisted national test center. You can reach out to an email I'm going to give you here in a minute. You can ask to be an unlisted national test center. So you can give just your students in your school or district a national test on a Saturday or Sunday. Keep in mind that ACT fee waivers that I mentioned earlier, fee waivers are where students can use up to 4 fee waivers to get the ACT for free. That's based on economic need. So that's only for national testing. Fee waivers are only used for national testing. We also have a pre-billed voucher purchase option for national testing. Your school or district can purchase these for kids to be able to use on a national test day, but we also have a lot of tribal organizations that purchase these for folks. Anybody can purchase these pre-billed vouchers, for example, for kids. I believe we have some businesses, and just depends on the entity. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a school that has to purchase these, but those are for national testing as well. We have, if you're interested in becoming a national test center, I do have a link down there. Go in and fill that out. Just keep in mind, a staff member has to serve as a test coordinator, and other school staff have to serve as room supervisors and proctors. Something to consider. Take a look at this. If you have a lot of kids that are going to be a fee waiver, I'd be an unlisted test center. Have them take that test at your site using that fee waiver for free. So the email at the bottom is where you go to sign up to be an unlisted test center. Just keep in mind, it is unpaid, and I've called that out there. So on a normal national test center, those folks are paid. On unlisted test centers, they are not. Just keep that in mind. The staff is doing that really to kind of benefit their local kids, and hopefully getting in a lot of those fee waiver kids to take one locally. That cuts down on the amount of travel that they have to do as well. Pre-ACT. Now, many of you, I've heard for years how you were upset that Explore and Plan went away. I understand. Well, it's back. We have it here for you in Pre-ACT 8-9, the Pre-ACT and the ACT. Explore and Plan are back, but they are updated. And so I say that I'm going to cover some of the updates in a minute. But my question is, if you're using the Pre-ACT from the Regents, why aren't you using Pre-ACT 8 and 9? This is a great vertically aligned system where you can generate data starting down at grade 8 and track that all the way up to the ACT, so to speak. And I'll explain that in a minute. On the Knowledge Hub, I mentioned that in the past, there's a section on Pre-ACT, and I'll include that in the links. You've got all kinds of articles and information there, understanding score reports, data for educators. There's a reports webinar series, how to use your results using your Pre-ACT 8-9 results in Spanish, for example. Communication toolkits. There's a lot of resources out there that we put in there for you to help you with Pre-ACT. There's a link at the top, the Knowledge Hub, for example, just a general landing one. The Pre-ACT reports, I put that link in here on this slide as well. It'll be at the end. But just keep in mind that if you have folks that are using the Pre-ACT, please have them go look at the webinar series and what data is available and how to use those results. I cannot tell you how many times over the past few years people give a Pre-ACT, but they're not using a Pre-ACT. And I know Lisa and Annette, they're at the Regents who travel around the state talking about Pre-ACT and how to use it. Understand where I'm going with this. Don't just give a kid a test. Use the data to help make an impact, on what those students have as far as addressing learning gaps. So please take that data. It's good data. It's data for college and career readiness. Some of the updates that I mentioned really would be the norms that we have for Pre-ACT 8 and 9. These are by grade level and season. These are added to the reports. The Pre-ACT readiness benchmarks are added to reports, but we also have, which I think is really neat, predictions for Pre-ACT. So for example, Pre-ACT 9 has a predicted value for Pre-ACT grade 10. Predictions for the ACT, but also predictions for the National Career Readiness Certificate, NCRC. So that links to WorkKeys and our WorkKeys assessments in the NCRC and whether or not they're essentially on track potentially for being prepared for the workforce. But it also identifies students who are ready to succeed in AP courses. You've asked for that. You've got it now. We have new data from 2020 on the Pre-ACT, and there's significant numbers are popping up showing that if you use a Pre-ACT, you get improvement in ACT test scores. That's spectacular because the usage has expanded dramatically since we launched it. And even though we have more usage, we're still getting more score gains. Score gains, of course, increase with rigor of high school coursework. You probably all know that. The kids in those higher courses taking more rigorous coursework are going to do better. They always do. But what's unique about this study looked at the differences in average gains across socioeconomic and racial ethnic groups. And what they found is it was small. So in other words, that's very interesting, because a lot of times when you use some of this stuff, the question is, who's benefiting the most? Is it just the kids who already have a lot of resources, who have parents that are highly educated, for example, and really involved in what they're doing on a day-to-day level? And the truth of the matter is, when you looked at score gains, this study looked at score gains and kind of corrected based on some of that input on salaries of the parents, socioeconomic status, highest level of education attained. When you look at that, the score gains were not so different. And I'll show you a slide here on that in just a minute. But when you look at this on the right-hand side, it shows, some of the score gains there, mean ACT scores by pre-ACT testing status. And so if you look, the students that didn't take a pre-ACT versus the ones that took a pre-ACT. And so you're seeing anywhere from 1 to 2 points. That's what we're seeing on average. Now, keep in mind, some of these schools are giving the pre-ACT and some of these schools are giving and using the pre-ACT. That's a big difference. I talked about that. Take a data dive. This is some of the information I pulled up here, and this is just on income, because I'm always concerned about income and are we, helping those folks at the lower income levels, for example. And when you look at the score gain versus the adjusted gain on the right, you'll see that it's pretty close. And so the average composite score gain from the pre-ACT test to the ACT test increased with family income, but once you statistically adjusted for like high school grades, course rigor, high school characteristics, and the number of months between tests, the differences were much, much smaller. And that's significant, because it's basically saying that you need to use the pre-ACT and it will have an impact on scores, no matter what your socioeconomic status is, and a positive impact. Let's talk about MyACT. That's the latest and greatest right now. I know a lot of you have had questions and some of you have been dealing with this. So for example, in the past, we had students would create an account in a different system. And as you well know, they would create an account for each administration, like state testing, district testing, national testing. Well, this created a process where kids had multiple accounts, and some of them, they're going to forget their username and password. We all do. And so this was creating a lot of problems. And so we needed to move to one system for essentially national, state, and district testing, for those kids to be able to go in there, get test prep, or sign up for tests, or even access their score reports. And so just like you folks have been asking for one password, one system, so have the students and our customers, and that's what we did. And so we started out with doing the migration to MyACT, and there were very specific instructions for new users versus returning users. And so we had to do a bunch of account mergers, so to speak. That took time. Now, I've been getting questions about super scoring, and why I'm bringing super scoring up is because that's still on the horizon. We don't have it out yet, but one of the things that we had to do is we had to really get MyACT up and running and merge all these accounts. We can't do a super score with a kid that has 6 different accounts and 6 different scores. So we had to get everybody in one system. And so that's what we've been working on. So stay tuned for super score updates. That's not going away. It's just on the horizon, just to let you know. I have no date as to when it will be officially in the system and usable or visible. So students get codes provided to them from test coordinators, and students must use the codes provided to them for each testing administration. And I say each administration, I'm referring to state testing, district testing, but not national testing. The codes are used to link their entries from the interest inventory in MyACT to your reports that you receive through online reporting. So what I'm saying here is, when kids create an account, they don't have to have a code to create an account. They can create an account without a code. But students get codes from test coordinators, and I'll explain that in a minute, that they need to plug into the system when they do the pretest portion of the ACT. And I'll explain a little bit more about that. The main thing that you need to understand is that the kids don't enter that code into that system and do the interest inventory, you're not going to receive the college career planning information that you normally do. That's done in that system now. A lot of you folks have told me we don't want to do the pre-test portion of the ACT, the interest inventory. every single time, nor do we want to do it at school. And so this allowed students to do this on the outside of the classroom online. You can still do it in the classroom. You can set up a day to do this, but students can do this outside the classroom online. This is for both paper and online options. They will do the interest inventory or pretest session either out in the classroom or outside online. Both of them are online, so to speak, but it's your choice on how you want to do that. So test coordinators, ACT ships a personalized non-test instructions for student form for each student assigned to take the ACT test based on the student data upload. So we have a deadline on the student data upload, and we pull that information to create those forms. Sometimes you get students that come in to take an ACT later that weren't in the initial student data upload that you upload after the fact. That's fine. We'll send you a blank form and you can use that blank form. It's not completely blank. It still has the non-test instructions, but it has a place for you to fill in the name and the code and stuff like that. We also have some mail merge options to be able to pull that out of the system and do that as well. But these forms are sent in testing material shipment along with a copy of taking the ACT for every student. And again, it's critical that students are provided their own personalized non-test instructions for student form to complete the non-test information in MyACT that has the code on it. That's why they need that. You have access to reports now, coordinators, where you can pull up and look for student usage. It's in Pearson Access Next. There's a link here that'll describe that for you. But it's this report, I think it says either yes or no on it right now to see if they've went in the system and done this in case you're having them do this on outside of the classroom. They have up to 2 days. So as soon as they get the material shipment with those codes, you need to give them to your kids. They can start in MyACT right then and do that. They have up to 2 days after the test event, either paper or online, to do that in MyACT online, just to let you know. The student's last name and student code must match what the student enters in MyACT. If there's a mismatch and the name is incorrect on their form, you can correct it in Pearson Access Next. If it's incorrect on their MyACT account, you need to send them to this contact page. And I'm not, and counselors, test coordinators, folks, you got to get your kids to and parents to use that form if they're having issues with that code. You can't track down, 50 different kids if they're having issues, for example, with stuff. That's what that form's there. It's all hands on deck for this. Every single person at ACT just about is working these forms to make sure that the kids are taken care of. With that being said, I know there's some kids that might not have had access to a code for whatever reason. I'm going to tell you right now, we're working on a solution. We're going to take care of them. So look for communications from ACT. How do you find the student code? Because let's say you don't have it on the form that was shipped to you. It's in Pearson Access Next. There's directions on that. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but they're there for you to be able to go in and you can pull up the student codes. That way you can write them in on that blank form, for example, and hand it to them. Again, students must complete the pretest portion of the ACT on MyACT to send 4 scores to colleges for free. These are official score reports from ACT. Now, in the system, in Success online, when you look at that score report and you print it and stuff like that, or you download it or you ship it, that's not the same thing as an official report. It's no different than if somebody was asking for an official high school transcript, right? We can pull those down and print them and all that, but usually they have a seal or whatever you guys do on them. So just keep that in mind. Now, I'm not saying change your practices, because I know a lot of you print student labels and put them on folders and stuff like that. That's perfectly fine. But just keep in mind that whatever you send to colleges, they're going to come back to ACT or the kid, and they're going to say, we need an official score report. That's why it's so important for those kids to send those 4 scores to colleges for free initially. Don't wait. They must enter the code into MyACT that was supplied to them either on the form or from PA Next when you looked it up. If they don't enter the code, the college career planning information will not be provided to you on your reports. And again, I'm just repeating this at the bottom because this is extremely important. They must complete the pretest portion in order to send 4 free scores to colleges. I'm going to link you to death. I'm not going to talk about all these, but I'm just going to tell you, I put these all together because I wanted you guys to have these because I get calls all the time and emails about, your trouble finding stuff. And so I've tried to put these together in some kind of format that's usable to you. So the first part I talked about, National Curriculum Survey, standards, the system you go to order like fee waivers and also standards posters, online reporting, for example, the landing page, how to get started as a trusted agent, requesting access, understanding the level of access, online reports. This is a hot online reporting options, but also this one right here, printing student labels. That's a big one people ask for quite a bit. Links. So TAA, requesting access as an accommodations person there, and the user's guide. District testing, that's school day testing, right? The web page there, the landing web page, which administration do you need? That just says, you know, gives you the different administrations you can click on to go to specific sites for like fall or spring, for example. And then more resources. The FAQ list I talked about that you guys helped create because of all the questions you're giving me. I'm passing those up and we're putting them in an FAQ list. They're right here. Enrolling in district testing. If you're interested in district testing, click here, start the enrollment process. You can sign a multi-year contract to lock down the rate. Remember, 4.2 point score gain for kids that take it 2 or more times. State testing, Oklahoma public institutions, you should bookmark this. An FAQ list for state testing. Pearson Access Next, TAA, signing into TAA, national testing, test dates, center requests, stuff like that. Resources for pre-ACT reports, and a whole bunch of links for my ACT because that's the biggest one, newest one out there. So quick start guides, stuff for test coordinator students. I included some practice tests in here for paper and one for online. So that's it for me, folks. And I'm going to stop right there and let's see if we have some questions.
We don't have any questions, Tony, but I love how you've organized those links. That's great. That's good.
Well, that's because I appreciate all of you. I'm also noticing some frequent flyers here in the presentation. So I appreciate all of you showing up. I try to give you goodies when I can.
This is great. Great. No questions. I mean, not yet, but maybe somebody is typing. So I'll just have patience and wait. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat, or you are welcome to come off mute and ask your question. And remember, there's not ever a stupid question or a crazy question. So please don't hesitate to ask questions. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any, but that's not saying. Tony, I'm going to type in your email address in the links. Oh, there it is. And oh, any chance the state regents will ever pick up the pre-ACT 8-9? I wished.
Yes,
no.
it's okay.
Yeah. Well, as I've told ACT years ago when they let go of it, you've messed up because our budget is like yours. It's down to not much. And so we do not have the budget for the 8-9. I wish we could. I've beat ACT enough about getting rid of the Explorer, so I don't have to beat them up anymore. But not at this time. There's not any money in the budget for an ACT 8-9, pre-ACT 8-9.
Keep in mind that it's fairly reasonable if you, it's around 13 a kid right now because we get a contract rate. It's normally about 14. But since we're a state contract, for example, we're using pre-ACT and even district testing there, we get $1 off. So $13 a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great assessment, but you got to use the data, just like Tony said. You got to use it. And I know there's a wealth of information in this presentation today. So, you know, go back and listen to it again, and lots of different questions I'm sure that you're going to have later. So Tony's email is there. So let him know. And I put my email address and Annette's in the chat that we can do a virtual presentation for your pre-ACT, but it's only virtual only this spring. Hopefully we'll get to travel soon, but maybe when you get out of school, who knows? Anyway, any other questions? I don't want to keep you, but I just appreciate your time. And Tony, thank you so very much. Very good presentation, a lot of information. And I know you've just filled all their brains with lots of things. So as I said, watch this again when it comes back out on the recording. And if you have any questions, let Tony know. And thank you again, Tony. Thank you everyone for joining us at the 4 Counselors Only Conference. I know Mr. Lawbuck's presentation is here in a little bit, so we will let everyone go and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.